Hi everyone, it's Will with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and we are doing 1915 today. Yesterday's 1939 video contained some very important material, so if you haven't watched that, I hope you'll go back and watch it. We had specifically trouble between Dmitri and Vladimir, a poison pen letter that Vladimir sent to Dmitri, couched in the most offensive terms of the head of the family reprimanding a Grand Duke who had gone astray. And Grunwald's theory was that the Germans were behind this letter and that they were deliberately stirring up the Nazis, I should say, and they were deliberately stirring up or trying to stir up discord within the imperial family that would completely discredit the imperial family and the individuals in question, not just Dmitri, but Vladimir. Okay, so today we have 1915, and our last diary entry from 1914 of the 14th. The most important, it was Dmitri's last day in Moscow, and the most important thing to remember from that one as we continue on with the diary entry of the 15th is this long conversation that Dmitri had with the ballerina Alexandra Balashova, who asked Dmitri to write to her. So we'll see what's going on with that. And she and Georgy Mikhailovich are the only people in our cast today. So this is the 15th/28th of January, returning to Usovo. So the diary entry itself is written not in Moscow but in Usovo, and Dmitri tells us it's 11/2 degrees below freezing, so very cold, and I guess he's using two different scales. So he gives us two numbers, 11 and 2, and he says that there's sometimes snow, sometimes rain, nothing steady. I like the way he puts it in Russian, "Не то снег, не то дождь," so, you know. Can't really talk about either snow or rain because you have both of them. Okay, here we go. I got up in Moscow at 10 o'clock. I slept well because I didn't drink much yesterday. Sad though it made me, I had to leave Moscow. GM and I went to the station at 2 and took the train to Pavshino. We left at 11:35 and arrived around 12:15. Then we got in a troika and arrived home around 1:30. Along the way, there was sun, which hid, and then snow, which quickly turned to rain. We had lunch when we arrived, then went for a walk. I took a rifle, but of course didn't see anything. I fired at some kind of bird, but didn't hit it. We had tea at 5 o'clock, after which I sat in my room and read Le Dimanche de Midi. Or is it Le Dimanche du Midi? I don't remember. It's a wonderful book and splendidly written. I read right up until dinner time. Then GM and I sat around in my room. I read, finished the first volume, then pasted my photographs from Rome into an album. After tea, I wrote a long and rather stupid letter to Balashova. I hope she doesn't answer it. Voilà une femme que je veux. So, what do you say in English? Voila, the woman that I want, or a woman that I want. I don't know. Okay, I guess it would be a woman that I want, because it's un and not la. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so Lemmy's return has definitely changed things a little. There's someone who's reining Dmitri in a little. Dmitri has already, he'd been drinking heavily, apparently, every day, and on the 14th he didn't drink much, and so today he feels he feels relatively good, and he slept well, I should say. And, I think he doesn't seem to object, but it seems like he's still being treated like a little bit of a child. Either Laming is with him or Cook is with him, but pretty much always someone. I think he only spent one day alone in Usovo. He was less supervised in Moscow until Laming returned. But, people are keeping an eye on him, and he seems to be okay with that. He also tells us that he has to go back to Usovo. He's sad leaving Moscow. He doesn't want to leave Moscow. He wants to stay in Moscow and have fun, right? Or at least be social. But he apparently has no choice. So maybe the choice was, well, if you want to continue to be on leave for your regiment, then you need to be focusing on your health and on recovering from whatever this ailment was, whereas if you are well enough to be having fun in Moscow, then you're well enough to go back to your regiment. So that may have been sort of the choice that was given him, or if not explicitly given to him, then he understood that he wouldn't be able to justify living in Moscow and not returning to his regiment. Okay, let's see. So interesting, Usovo, so Pavshino is just, it's very close, very close. It only took them about 40 minutes, right, to get to Pavshino from Moscow. So it's almost like a suburb of Moscow, not really deeply out in the countryside. But it does then take them a while. In the Troika, it takes them more than an hour to get to Usovo, which doesn't mean necessarily that Usovo is a long ways away. The Troika might have been moving very quickly, and I guess in the earlier diary entry when Dmitri was going to Moscow and he and Cook were in a Troika, it sounded like they went all the way to Moscow in a Troika, and I think they did, because he said it took something like 3 hours. But in this instance, they get the Troika at Pavshino and go to Usovo. Very romantic, though. Would make a very nice scene in the movie. Okay, we can skip the weather report. He goes out with his rifle. I don't think his heart was necessarily always in it when he went hunting. It seems like he could... He's pretty casual about it, pretty much. Yeah, I shot at a bird, but I didn't kill it. I don't know. Either he was a horrible shot, or he just, his heart wasn't in it. And things that his son Paul told me kind of lead me to believe that, yeah, he didn't so much enjoy killing things. Although you remember when he was a kid, he was always out there shooting at crows when he was at Neskuchnoye in Moscow. And anyway, I don't want to go off with on a tangent with that. Le Dimanche du Midi, so he's returning to this book by Paul Bourget, and I decided, well, after all, I better read this. Can't find it in English, so I'm going to read it in French, even though it's slower. So I bought it. You can get it for 99 cents on Amazon, and I've just started with the introduction by Paul Bourget, and he's talking about how this book is kind of about a person who has really strong convictions, really strong religious convictions, but behaves in another way, is sort of carried away by his passions, by his sexual passions, and that he's sort of exhausted by the internal struggle between those two facets of his existence. And Bourget also says that it is a book about a midlife crisis, because most people, this sort of thing, even if they've been struggling with it for a long time, it kind of comes to a head when they're middle-aged and start asking themselves what is the meaning of life. And have I blown it? And so Dmitri at 23 obviously was too young to be having a midlife crisis. But I think, unless he was reading this book only because of smut, because the main character is, a sexually charged person, apparently. I haven't read the book yet, of course. And I don't know, how much actual, what you could call smut is actually in it. Maybe not much by the standards of the day. The book, of our day, the book, by the way, was written in 1914, and Dmitri is reading it here in January 1915. So it was, the equivalent of a new book coming out now that everybody's excited about. Probably not everybody in Russian, because it's a French book. In Russia, that is, because it's a French book. But it's the latest thing that he's reading. We think of it as an old book, but for him, it's at that time period, it's the latest thing. So, and he really loves it. He's really sitting down and reading this book for hours. It's not such a small book, and it's 2 volumes. So, and he's just devouring it, and clearly really likes it. So I'll be quite interested to see when I'm well into the book myself, what it was perhaps that he liked so much. And actually, one of the viewers, one of you, commented and asked if I could provide a list of the books that Dmitri mentions reading in his diaries, and I said, oh sure, I can do that. So I need to do that. I'm sorry, I'm terrible about letting things like that slip my mind. But this one is one of the ones that he raves about the most, compared to other books that sometimes he just says, oh, I'm reading this. Okay, so then when he's done reading, he and Laming are sitting around, I say in Dmitri's room, but it's an apartment, they're sitting around there in the sitting room, probably in his apartment. And first he's reading, and then he turns to another activity. He's got apparently photos from his trip to Rome in 1914. And so he's pasting those into a photo album. And where is that photo album? Do his descendants have it? Is it in Russia at the Tsarskaya Selo Museum? Does it continue to exist after? Probably the biggest likelihood is that it wasn't something that he grabbed and took with him when he left Russia right after the Rasputin assassination. Well, not immediately after, but he got the order from the Tsar to leave less than 24 hours before they put him on the train. And so, things like this were probably just lost. Maybe it's in an archive in Russia. Anyway, he refers back in later post-revolutionary diary entries. He does refer to the people that he met, both in Paris and in Rome, when he was on this sort of abbreviated grand tour. I mean, he didn't leave Europe. It was the custom, of course, not only for royal princes, but for aristocratic young men. I think primarily men, maybe some women did it, to make the grand tour. And oftentimes it really was a grand tour. It was not just to Europe, but to Asia, maybe to America, north or south. But in Dmitri's case, with war on the way, with things unstable, yeah, it was very abbreviated. He doesn't mention going elsewhere than Italy and France. Rome and Paris primarily. He was also in Sicily, ostensibly for his health. He seems to have had another one of his depressive incidents when he was in Russia, and lashing out at people, and yeah. Anyway, what I'm getting to is he met lots of interesting people in Rome, and he mentions those people later in his diaries, some of them, the ones that he maintains contact with. Okay, so now the letter to Balashova. Boy, he sure didn't waste any time, did he? He was in Moscow that morning, and in Usovo that evening. He's already writing to her. Why does he say it's a stupid letter? Gloopy, I probably sappy. you know, maybe sentimental, maybe saying, oh, I love you or something like that. Well, I doubt he said that, but you get the idea. You know, kind of a sappy, silly letter. I don't get the impression that, you know, he said he may that it was suggestive, but that may also have been the case. So it's stupid. I hope she doesn't answer, but she's the woman I want. Voila, the woman I want. So what does that mean? He seemed to have been interested in Geltzer. Now he's interested in Balashova. He's definitely lost interest in both Tamara and Nastya because they embarrassed him and they were boring. So when he says this is the woman he wants, I don't think he means this is by any stretch of the imagination that this is a woman he's in love with, although he may have been sweet-talking her. What he means is, this is the next one on my list, is how I interpret that. And recall that, yeah, Geltzer was the one that he found so interesting, but, you know, and he hasn't said anything against her, except that when she was at the disastrous dinner with Laming, she didn't know what to say, with her two friends behaving badly, the two other women. But anyway, yeah, we have to take it at face value, and we have to wait and see if it develops. Because I really don't remember what's going to happen later in 1915, except I know at some point the woman that he's spending all his time with, primarily when he's in Moscow, is not an actress or a ballerina, but Countess Brasova, Grand Duke Mikhail Alexandrovich Grand Duke Michael's wife, which wasn't appreciated by Michael, of course. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of my time, of myself. So what do we have next? Well, we have a serious discussion on Grunwald's part about how these interviews have affected Dmitri's overall popularity, his standing within the emigre community, what people are happy, what people are angry, and the overall impact that it's likely to have on him. So again, very, very interesting. And yeah, hope to see you next time. As always, take care. Bye.